Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to the Tipping Point podcast. I have a very special guest with me tonight. We're privileged to welcome a true polymath in the world of social media and an unwavering devotee of LA, Evan Lovett. With roots deeply intertwined with the city, Evan's profound understanding of Los Angeles sets him apart as a remarkable individual. His lifelong connection to this dynamic metropolis has gifted him with a depth of knowledge and insight. Not only is he a trailblazing social media content creator, but he's also the co-founder of the pioneering advertising distribution network, Arden Advisors, which was acquired by Media Trust for $16 million in April of 2010. With such diverse talents and experiences, we're thrilled to have Evan here today, and I'm personally eager to gain wisdom from his expertise. Without further ado, welcome, Evan. How are you?
Thank you. It is great to be here. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Good. It's exciting. Thank you for having me on.
I need to tell you, just on a personal note, I'm so excited to sit with you today because I've been following up with you for months, and I went to your show in Los Angeles in the public library. I saw you put on an amazing show in front of everyone, and I saw how passionate you were, and that's the day I knew, okay, I need to interview him, and I'm just so happy that we're sitting here right now.
Well, thank you. Yes, that was a LA Made at the LA Public Library, which was a good highlight of last year for LA in a minute. And I'm glad you were there, and I'm glad we met, and I'm glad you've been persistent and pound the table to have me on. So it's great that we can make this happen.
I knew you started LA in a minute to teach your son about LA's history in a fun and interactive way. Just like all kids like to learn things fun and interactive, and adults too, I'll say.
Right.
What was it that made you want to start LA in a minute? Was that the sole purpose, or was it a couple of reasons and your son was just one of them?
Great question. LA in a minute came from a lifelong passion for the city of Los Angeles, and the fact that, listen, I'd always heard there's no history, no culture in LA, but there's always stories, and there is history and culture. You just need to know where to look. And as they say, peel back those layers of the onion. And I'm always had that passion and curiosity to learn about this city. I've always had this pride since my parents were taking me around from Venice Beach to my dad. He was a boxing manager, so he had a gym in South LA.
Wow.
We'd go to South LA, and then we'd swing by Boyle Heights on the way back from El Tepeyac. They have this burrito called Manny's Burrito. It's a 5-pound burrito, biggest burrito in LA. My dad would get it, so our family, the neighbor's family, we'd come home and split it. But always loved LA. My parents showed me all these great parts of LA that have this history. Now, they weren't necessarily historians, but they always appreciate it. My mom loved the outdoors in Griffith Park and Venice Beach Boardwalk and just the people. And I just always had this passion and curiosity. So I was the guy who would always text my friends stupid trivia or facts about Los Angeles.
Right.
Did you know Val Kilmer went to Chatsworth High School? Or did you know that McDonald's didn't start in San Bernardino? It started in an airport in Monrovia. And just sometimes people be like, that's great. And other times they'd be like, who cares? But all that stuff intrigued me. So when my son needed positive, valuable screen time, I was like, I'm going to start talking about Los Angeles. But it actually started as news stories. I'd read like I'd synopsize 3 news stories in a day. Here's what happened in Los Angeles in 60 seconds. And it wasn't until, it's about 2 weeks in, so it's pretty quick. I'm always reading books, and I was reading Made in California by George Geary, which is about all these famous food places that came from Los Angeles. Everything from Hamburger Hamlet to Bob's Big Boy to Carl's to Hot Dog on a Stick to Panda Express. They all came from LA, and that just intrigued me. So I did a story on the 10 oldest fast food chains from Los Angeles, and that quote unquote went viral. And on my way to work, where I work, I always walk across the LA River every day. And the LA River, as we know, is just a concrete channel.
Right.
So I was always like, how is this a river? It's so funny. I grew up 4 blocks from the LA River. They never call it the LA River. It's always the Wash. So I say, is this a river? So I do a story. What's a brief history of the LA River? And people loved it. And just that kind of cascaded into all these stories. And everywhere you drive in LA, every neighborhood. There's 572 neighborhoods in LA. They all have character. They all have culture. They all have good food. They all have history. And I love digging into these stories because there's always these funny little tidbits. So it's just something I've been really passionate about and been fortunate to put together and develop a good following and good product that we're building out. And it just kind of is going and going, and we're sort of expanding from there.
What do you think is it that captivates people so much to what you provide?
I think there's a couple things. Number one, off air before the show, you mentioned something. You're like, I never really stopped to think about LA's history. I
Right.
think a lot of people are like that because LA is this history city that doesn't autonomously promote its history. I mean, there obviously are anniversary celebrations, things like this, but other cities, you go to Philadelphia, you can't escape the Liberty Bell, right? But in Los Angeles, you're like, quick, what's history of Los Angeles? And people, they're Hollywood, oh, I don't know, it was an oil city. But LA is always a city of the future. So I think letting people stop and realize, like, hey, that ground you're walking on, here are the stories that happened, here are the people that were here before that. Here's something significant and fun that you didn't know about this neighborhood, this city, this restaurant, all these things that we drive by, maybe don't stop to think about. But also it resonates because people have this super pride in Los Angeles. You just need to go to a Dodger game or a Laker game to see that. And I shine a positive light on Los Angeles. I really strive to. And like my wife says, you're feeding me this information that I want to know, but I'm not going to go like stop and look it up. So I think that I kind of struck a nerve with people in Los Angeles for that.
Yes. Yeah. And that's powerful because when you can, let people resonate with you and share vital information, it's a win-win situation for what you love to talk about, and you're providing value to other people. So
yeah, I think it's a positive, definitely not positive, especially in this age of social media with trends and, lower value kind of content that sort of catches on. So I think it's a breath of fresh air in that regard also.
it is. It really is. What is there maybe one or two aspects of LA that really captured your attention? Was it the food? Was it the sports? Was it the neighborhood? Was it, how municipalities are run? Is it something in specific that really captured your attention and said, okay, LA is different from this other place that I've been or this other county that I've been?
Are you saying as a whole with my love affair of Los Angeles or in regard to LA in a minute?
Any way you want to take it.
Look, I'm naturally passionate and curious. So every time I'm going anywhere, on the drive here, I'm driving by and LA you're on the freeway and it's like the El Camino Real. You get off the freeway, there's various, right here. I mean, I don't know how you are about saying the location. Some people are kind of interesting about that, but
Fine.
Okay, so on my way here, I passed by Los Encinos Historic Park, and that's in Encino in the San Fernando Valley. And that's one of the most significant sites in Los Angeles history because that's where Achiocominga was the name of the village. And it was a native, when the Tongva Gabrielino Keys people were here first, there was a natural water source there. And that was a very important village. And that was here for thousands of years before Portola and the exhibition came in. And it's right there in Encino. And guess what? I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. We used to play basketball at a park blocks away from there. Never thought about that. Never. So it's just, there are all these historical things that in Los Angeles, we just kind of either take for granted or don't really stop to think about. So it's all of it. The food included, like if you pin me down, I'll tell you this, at least at the beginning, the food was really intriguing in the sense that Los Angeles exported food culture to the world, fast food culture. I mean, look, the McDonald'sization of society, globalization basically started with McDonald's and that came from Los Angeles. And again, you got Taco Bell, you have all the Fat Burger, In-N-Out. These are all like cultural Portos, for instance, and they all have history and they all come from these LA American dream stories. King Taco, Raul Martinez was the first taco truck, right? Like there were quote unquote roach coaches. And then Roy Choi came in, of course, and like revolutionized everything. But it goes back to Raul Martinez, who was making carne asada at MacArthur Park. And then he was like, I'm going to buy an ice cream truck and start making carne asada on the ice cream truck. People told me it was crazy. Turned into King Taco. Lo and behold, food trucks became a thing. And so the food was maybe the first thing that drew people in. But again, it's everything whether you're talking about neighborhood, people are like, oh, that's my neighborhood. I didn't know that history. So it's all just fun to discover and explore.
It's so fun to just sit there and discover everything because there's so many silos you could go into, and it's kind of like a never-ending rabbit hole, but it's a good rabbit hole because you're just learning.
It's funny because when I set up my YouTube channel, they have playlists. And ironically, I'm not a consumer of a lot of media. I don't watch a lot of TV or movie or YouTube. But I know the people were like, you got to set up playlists. And I never thought about it in this context until I had to do it on my own channel, which was you have a playlist for food, a playlist for sports, because LA does have a lot of great sports history, and the venues, the Forum, the Coliseum, the Rose Bowl. They're also historic. The Olympic Auditorium no longer exists, but that is like wildly historic, and I love those stories. But then you have people, you have true crime. LA is and I haven't really explored that too much. But at this point, you have like the Wonderland murders, OJ, Zanku chicken murders. Like Los Angeles has a lot of really good true crime stories, and I'm just scratching the tip of the iceberg on those. People, we haven't even dove into people. LA's most known for its like celebrity and historical figures. I haven't even touched upon that. Right now, I've just done sort of Jonathan Gold, Art LeBeau, Biddy Mason, Vin Scully, but there's hundreds, there's thousands. So the point is, their architecture, different buildings. That is Sheets Goldstein House, case study homes, things like that. So there's just so many infrastructure, freeways, and all this stuff is so fun to kind of put in the context of modern Los Angeles. So, I mean, there are different ways to approach it, different silos, as you said.
Right.
But it's never ending. And that's the funny thing.
That's the beauty of it.
Yes, that is the beauty of it. Absolutely.
And of course, as we're talking and as I'm learning, there's so many good things about LA. But if you could give one critique about it, what would it be?
All right. I've done an episode on the 5 things people hate about Los Angeles. I'm not gonna cop out and say that those are the top 5, but for me personally,
I've seen that video too. It was a good one.
A critique. Yeah. Listen, it's tough to see the state of the homeless and unhoused in Los Angeles right now. I'll be honest with you. I know it's a complex issue. I know that the solution is 30 years down the road. That's the right approach. You need mental facilities, you need housing, you need resources, but also for a world-class city right now, you need short-term solutions. And that means finding housing, or at least finding a place to not have encampments in residential areas near schools where I'm walking to work, where my son is riding his bike. Sure. There needs to be a better, faster, more thorough response to that. So that's my critique.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're all citizens of LA, and we all, deserve to, anyone that's unhoused or needs housing, they deserve their housing. But at the same time, you want to, feel comfortable walking your son to school, or you going to work. So I could understand both perspectives.
Let me give you the moment. I'll tell you the moment that I flipped on this. My son was 3. We lived on a major street, not a major street, but a busy street.
Sure.
And we were walking to get shaved ice. He was 3.5, and down 4 like buildings down from where we lived was an undeveloped property. It wasn't an abandoned property. It was just, for whatever reason, one plot of land in Los Angeles that had never been developed, or at least not in the last like 40, 50 years. Point is, there's an encampment there. First, there's 4 people, 8 people, that turns into a community. And we have to walk through it to get to the shaved ice place. And forget explaining what's going on, but what happens is there's a shopping cart, right? And the shopping cart has a sign, and it says, "Do not touch, do not move, exposed hypodermic needles. I'm hepatitis C positive." And my son's 3.5, and he's like, "What does that sign say?" And this is the first time in my life at that point that I was like, do I lie to him and say, "Oh, it just says don't touch my stuff," or do I tell him the truth and like deal with that reality to him, right away? So that was a moment that stuck with me, especially because the difficulty in getting the fact that you have that in a residential neighborhood that we're walking through with the child to go get shaved ice. But then after that, the process of just trying to get some remedy to that situation, the senior lead officer, the community organizations, and then blah, blah, blah. And it takes months to get something like that. So that sort of changed my perspective on that. And that's the moment I sort of go back to as far as, and that's still an issue. It's not as bad. I think it is improving. I do want to say I think Karen Bass is making some progress and doing a good job in this regard relative to the challenge, size of the challenge she had, but it's still an issue.
Yeah, Karen Bass, if you ever see this, I'd love to talk to you. And
There you go.
So, just out of curiosity, when your son asked, "What is that?" What did you tell him?
I said, it says, don't touch my things. It's a sign that says, don't touch my stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There we go. So much life experience. As we said in the introduction, you've been successful in business. You've been successful in content creation. You have your marriage with your wife, and you have your son. And it's not easy to balance all these things. So you've been through a lot in your life. What is one piece of advice you would impart to 18-year-old Evan?
18-year-old Evan's a different story. Let's see. Look, I'll tell you what, I always had a sense of responsibility and legacy, frankly. Like I always was driven to somehow leave a mark that would resonate positively for my family, both on my parents' side and for my kids' side. So I always had that in mind. Had I strayed, of course, especially in your teens, 20s, even into my 30s, I was having fun, doing some screwing around. But I always had that sort of nagging sense of like, no, you got to get things done and do something positive. But I will say this not to give any platitudes, I feel that some of the greatest traits and advice that I would give people in general are persistence, which I know you have in droves, which is excellent. And look, the cliche of showing up is half the battle. It really is.
It really is.
Get out there, do things, meet people. I don't like meetings. I don't like seeing people face to face. You can do a Zoom, blah, blah, blah. No, like nothing takes the place of actual human contact and going somewhere. And even just in the sense of the stories and episodes I do, they're so much higher quality. If I'm reporting on Glendale, by going to Glendale, I know that sounds obvious, but I use green screen for a lot of like historical and informative stuff. Sure. And I've done full episodes of green screen, but when you're there and you feel it and you can just, it's like the old movie Good Will Hunting, if you said it. If you've ever seen it, I'm paraphrasing, but they're like, you can tell me every detail about the Sistine Chapel, but you can't tell me what it smells like. You know what I mean? It's like, because being there, you just feel, whether I'm doing Koreatown, whether I'm doing Sylmar, whether I'm doing historic South Central, I want to walk those streets. So I think being there, being persistent, I don't want to say never take no for an answer, but people have good days and bad days. And even if you get rejected, you got to come back. You got to figure out what you were doing wrong. And if you really want it, you need to go for it. And that's the biggest and most important thing. Don't listen to other people. Okay, what would I tell my 18-year-old self, and why did it take me so long to figure out my lane? There it is. I listen to people. I care what people think to an extent, and being a good human being. Sure. Those are like decent qualities, but you can't let that slow you down. When I was younger, I'd put too much emphasis on looking stupid, being embarrassed. Oh, I don't want to be the one who raises my hand or asks a question. But no, if you want to know and you want to succeed, you got to be that person. So I think that's the big advice. Thanks for helping me work through that right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that really resonates with me. I'm not sure if you're aware with Chris Williamson. He's a podcaster. Okay. And he's very famous, so good at what he does. And he has this one quote that I carry with me in my heart and in my head and my soul. I had to look like a fool 1,000 times before I look like a master. Maybe I may be paraphrasing him, but for what I remember, he was saying that one of the podcasts he was on as a guest. And to anyone watching this, like Evan says, and I'll agree with him, showing up is half the battle, but I'll just take it one step further. Showing up is great. Do it. I'm not saying don't do it. Show up, but just take that one step. Say hello. Shake a hand. Introduce yourself. Tell them what you can offer, not what you can gain from someone. Try to help other people. And by doing this, you're going to create a compound effect. Just doing it once a week or once a month, every Saturday or Sunday or whatever day you feel like going, do that. And it's going to compound and compound and compound. Before you know
It's
it,
an investment.
it's an investment in you. 1 year is going to pass by and you're going to look back and you're say, wow, I really went this far. So I agree with you.
I'll tell you something right here. This is a great example of podcast. Okay. Like, quote unquote, anybody can start a podcast. And it's true. Anybody can.
Sure.
But how many people do, right? Like, if you're like, I should start a podcast on whatever it is you like, whatever your niche is, you like linoleum floors, you want to have a podcast about linoleum floors, like, well, guess what? You can. So the next step is to actually start. How do I do it? You do the research, then you got to figure out the equipment, then you got to find a space, and then you got to actually do it. And guess what? It's going to be terrible at first, right? But then you work on it and you keep doing it and you figure out what you're doing wrong and you improve it and you improve it. But doing it and working towards it and continuing to be persistent, like that's sort of the metaphor. And that's whether it is the podcast or whatever it is, it's just going for it and doing it, because once you're there, there's no looking back and you're already doing it. And that's more than half the battle.
Absolutely. And if anyone here is watching this going through a hard time, I've been there. I've been there thousands of times. Feel your emotions, go through what you're going through. But after you're done, feel it, honor your emotions, do it. Get the help you need, whatever it is. But then after that, roll up your sleeves and get to work. And you will surprise yourself by the opportunities that life has in front of you, and doors will open and you will surprise yourself. That's the most simple way I could put it. Again, let me go back to my question.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry for that little detour.
That's good though.
Yeah. So that's good. That's the advice you would impart to your younger self of, just in summary, not worrying so much about what he or she is doing, worry about what you want to do. Right. I got a good question for you, which I've been thinking about for months. Now I could ask you.
Okay.
If you could, we love LA, we all know it, I know. But if you could consider living somewhere else outside of Los Angeles, not in LA, where would it be and why?
I've thought about this a lot, just because whether I would or not. I would live in Las Vegas or San Diego. Those are my two favorite American cities that are close enough to Los Angeles. And I mean that geographically and kind of culturally as well. They both have a lot of overlap. San Diego's just beautiful and calm. And it's like a small town LA. Mexican food, close to Mexico. It's a great. Vegas, I've always had a soft spot for. Again, as I mentioned, my dad was a boxing manager. I used to go to Vegas every month as a kid, so I saw Vegas evolve since the 1980s, and it's really kind of not just mind-blowing, the astronomical evolution of Vegas, but I consider it not just LA's backyard, but also on a trajectory just like Los Angeles, where it's a city that maybe shouldn't have been a metropolis, but due to human ingenuity and just downright willingness and persistence and people wanting to make it happen, force of will, they made it happen in this mirage, no pun intended to the Mirage Hotel, RIP, popping up in the desert that now is not just a city based on gambling in the Strip, but it's a city that's developed culturally. UNLV's grad programs are improving. They have outdoor events. The Fontainebleau and Resorts World, two major hotels, are both flops. Barely even a ripple in Las Vegas because their economy is so diversified. They have Fortune 500 companies. It's a real city. And I've kind of looked at it with the pride because I've always thought of it as LA's backyard. So I'd like to live part-time in Vegas at some point, just as a rule of thumb. So I'd say Vegas, but it's tough to live there year round because it just gets too hot. I don't love too much time in the summer. I am a big cold weather guy though. But San Diego and Vegas are two cities. But
the architecture, the culture, everything, it's one of a kind, really.
It is one of a kind. And again, it changes. And it's funny because I just took my son there for the first time. Really is a lot of family-friendly stuff. Going back to when I was a kid, circus, or just the pools and stuff like that. But whether you're in your 20s and really having that kind of good time, or 30, taking in shows, taking in dinners, it really is like a getaway. but it's become a real bona fide metropolis, and people are moving there. My wife's cousin lives there. One of her great friends lives there, and I don't know, it's a real city, and I'm sort of proud of sports teams. The A's are coming in. They have the Golden Knights, the Raiders. I grew up a Raider fan, so Vegas is it's a city that I look at with pride, and I love Vegas. So
I love it. So we were talking earlier on and off camera. You have a son, like you were telling us. Has becoming a parent influenced your view on Los Angeles, you would say?
Absolutely. Well, one, I don't get to enjoy the restaurants and, let's say, nightlife as I once did, but that's opened up other areas and made me more conscious of wanting to explore places that maybe I took for granted. We took my son to the Hollywood sign, which I had always kind of rolled my eyes at. Oh, tourist, it's a sign, who cares? But when you actually go up there and that park and walk up there, you're like, this is pretty amazing. And knowing the status that sign has in the world, and like taking my son up there, because I never had actually been up to the Hollywood sign, so that was cool. But whether it is Venice or Griffith Park, just taking him places or showing him things, simple things like LA has mountain ranges running through that. We don't even think about that here. The Santa Monicas, the San Gabriels, we're the only metropolis in the United States that has a mountain range in the middle of the city. Like, it's ridiculous to kind of think about. And especially now, it's been like really rainy, and I tell my son, I'm like, listen, enjoy last year and this year, because we're about to have a drought for like 15 years. And that's how it goes in LA.
Right.
But when it's like this, these mountains and these hills are so green and verdant, and it's like, dude, Los Angeles becomes more beautiful than it's been, and so clear, and it's so clean. And yes, being a father, to sort of emphasize those aspects of LA, or impart upon him about the diversity of the city and why it's important to go to different restaurants, not like restaurants, but just spots like tacos, pupusas, like mini kebab, like, honestly. So really just to show him and share with him and see through his eyes, like, these elements of Los Angeles.
Yeah. It is very important. Because I immigrated to this country, and when I came to Los Angeles, my parents were they were so kind as to look up everything. Just immigrants to this country, they didn't know a word of English, but they learn. They still put in the time to look up. Oh, there's SeaWorld. There's Disneyland. There's In-N-Out. All these places, and they really, put in that work for me and my sister to have that American upbringing, that experience. So I shout out to my parents. Thank you.
Super important. Yeah. And that's great to have that kind of upbringing as well. I mean, we're lucky. I know I'm lucky to have both parents, and aligned parents who are aligned on my behalf to kind of support and provide a good upbringing and an outlook on Los Angeles as well. And I know that that's really reflected in the way that I run LA in a Minute in my podcast as well. Like, that positivity really comes from them, specifically my mom, who was just ridiculously optimistic.
Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of connections and people of LA and just all these wonderful people that live in LA, you've actually talked to some very impressive people. Ben Baller.
Shout out, Ben. What up?
Shout out, Ben. I want to talk to you soon one day. Ben Baller, Mayor Karen Bass, attorneys, sports, you name it, comedians. I knew you'd recently spoke to Fluffy.
Yes.
Tell me, I'm very interested. I mean, if I wanted to ask about every story, we would be here till next week. So I'll just keep it to one person. I'm very interested to know how was your experience of interviewing Mayor Karen Bass?
Karen Bass, first of all, and I'll be honest with you, so I grew up, both my parents, so I keep a little too, they were hippies, right?
Sure.
I always say my dad burned his draft card and my mom burned her bra. Those weren't literal, but anybody know, all my friends know that that's exactly how they were. Thus, I grew up a liberal Democrat, the son of two very liberal Democrats. And that's how I was brought up. And you kind of either are your parents or you're the opposite of your parents. That's a different story. I was a reflection of my parents. Didn't even think twice, right?
Sure.
Then as I grow older and reality sort of sets in, I shift a little bit politically, see different things changing in Los Angeles, especially during COVID, whether it was crime or narrative or the way these things were being handled, schools, homeless, all this kind of stuff. Boom, this is right when the mayoral race comes up. And the first election of my life, because I'd been shifting in LA, I'd been shifting a certain direction that I didn't love, to be fully honest with you, where I was like, you know what? I don't know that I'm going to vote for the Democrat here. It was Karen Bass versus Rick Caruso, right? And Caruso was kind of reflective of Richard Riordan, right? Who had been elected in the 90s and came in as a wealthy outsider on an outsider's platform. We need to clean up and fix this city. And that was what Caruso was reflecting. And I truly was an undecided voter. And I talked to both. I had both of them on LA in a minute. So we did a one-on-one segment with each. And I got to meet both and spend some time with both and interview both. And, during my interview with Karen Bass, it was very interesting because I didn't know what to expect. A politician's a politician. Now, as I've been doing this for a lot longer, I meet a lot of politicians, council people, assembly people, congressmen, things like that. I've yet to meet a senator, but hopefully soon.
You will one day.
But yeah. So when I met Karen Bass, I'll never forget, we sat down in North Hollywood at a dance studio outside of one of her. She was speaking and doing some fundraising and stuff like that. She was just so warm and genuine, like right off the bat. And I was surprised, I'll be honest with you, because this is politics, man. That's where, acting in politics, I guess, the fakest of the fake, or you need to put on that fake.
Demonstrative, yeah.
She was so warm and nice and generous with her time. And I was like, and that doesn't necessarily make a good mayor, but it made a good impression. And I was like, damn, that's really good. So long story short, we get to the vote. And it was really close. I did the debates. I covered the debates for KNX and things like that. And I really dug in, and I was curious. This is the first time, in my mind, this is the most important election in my lifetime locally. And I'm politically active and definitely politically aware, but I was really like to make the right vote. So Bass is elected, and I get to sit down with her. And again, from the beginning of the process to reaching out to her team was interested, and they're fans of LA in a minute, and they understand that, I do a lot of political coverage and I try to really keep it objective. I think that that's one of my strengths is what I do, is I lean on my journalistic background. I was a journalist, worked for the LA Times coming out of UCLA. And I think they appreciated the fact that I don't root for either team, at least not publicly. And I really don't. I just root for the city.
Sure.
And they respected that. And they weren't like, oh, well, we need to make Mayor Bass look good and blah, blah. So they interview. And look, I'm not going to lie. It wasn't a freestyle, anything goes interviews. Like the questions had to be approved, but they were cool about it. The team was understanding because they know people want answers. And I had to ask about the homeless because that's the number one issue in Los Angeles. Education at the time, things like that. Transportation is now a huge thing that's going up in LA. So the team was great. Again, when we sit down in City Hall, she was just so nice. Where do you want me to sit? I don't need it. Oh, whatever you want, like da-da-da. And I was just... here's the mayor of one of the most important cities in Los Angeles taking the time for me. And I know LA in a minute with Evan Love have gotten bigger, but it's not this huge superstar platform that everybody needs to drop everything for. And here's the mayor of Los Angeles giving her time, being genuine, giving good answers that didn't seem like canned talking points. Like you go back and listen to that podcast or, I put up all my feeds. But she was very genuine. And again, I don't agree with everything she says, but it was such a good experience. And her team was so good and made it as comfortable as possible for something that was a really big deal. I mean, like, I'll be honest, I was nervous. I was, you're sitting down with the mayor. So it was a really good experience. And, to this day, I still have a relationship with that team. So I think that says a lot about them and about how the experience with Mayor Bass went. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That must be truly, I could only imagine you felt like it's an honor to talk to the mayor of LA, one of the most just well-known places in the world, and sat down with her.
Absolute honor. And to see the inner workings in the office and the building, and they gave me a private tour, not a private tour, By the way, they actually give tours. I recommend everybody who's in LA, go to City Hall, 27th floor. It's the Tom Bradley Tower. You get a 360-degree panoramic view of Los Angeles. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And it's free. Go do that. All you need to do ahead of time is just make sure there's not a special event, but it's free and they'll take you up there. And it was mind-blowing.
You book online?
You don't even need to book. You just need to call and make sure that there's no special event there that day.
I actually didn't even know. I'm going to check.
That's what I'm saying. I'm posting an episode on that. See you too. Stay tuned.
Awesome. So how do you envision the trajectory of LA 5 years from now? Of course, you're not going to know it because that no one will know.
No.
But like a vision,
You're going to see a lot more mass transit, public transit. Somebody's telling me to call it public transit. Don't call it mass transit. But listen, HLA passed in the latest election. That means there's more bus lanes, more bike lanes. This is happening, people. Whether or not you like it, it's happening. And I'll be honest, I'm a huge car guy. I'm a proponent of the car. This is Los Angeles, the home of car culture, and I drive. And one of my favorite things to do with my wife and son is to drive around and explore different neighborhoods. Let's get on the freeway, sit in traffic, and let's drive. But to be a true world-class city, Los Angeles needs to have world-class transportation. We've been way past the breaking point for a long time. I remember before COVID, and I'll get back to the story, but the Thanksgiving week before COVID, and I'd grown up in Los Angeles all my life. I always laugh when people make fun of traffic because I'm like, that's the price of living here. You got to deal with it. Right. I don't care if you're staying in the Valley, staying in Southeast LA, wherever you're going, double the time. Right. It's going to take. Right. But before COVID in November, I was pulling my hair out where I'm like, okay, I've reached my breaking point because traffic everywhere was so bad all the time. And then it's kind of recently creeped back to those levels, but it's corresponding with this growth of Metro, the passing of HLA. And I think one of the main things we are going to see, they are moving forward with this, whether it's extending rail lines, whether it's focusing on getting people on the buses, riding bikes, being pedestrians. LA is going that direction. In 5 years, I think you're going to notice a noticeable shift. It's already moving that direction, but they're forcing it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the 2028 Olympic Games because they want it to be so accessible for people to get from venue to venue because this is such a spread out city and tourists can't all be renting cars, especially with what they think is going to be another Carmageddon. So I think that's going to be a main thing. I do think that one way or the other, the homeless, unhoused situation is going to be improved.
Good.
But I think that the big change you're going to see is the push towards transportation, a lot more mass transportation and accessibility in that regard.
Good. Yeah, and it's very important because me, as a resident of Los Angeles, it is always a bumper-to-bumper traffic situation, and a lot of people are passionate about it because, something needs to be figured out. I don't have the answers. I'm just trying to seek it.
Dude, they're talking about gondolas. They're talking about monorail still.
Oh, wow.
But it's the extension of the train. And I'll be honest, listen, I embrace the train when I can take it. I know it's tough because we're not New York. We're not used to it. We don't have subway stops every mile in every direction because LA is so big, but they're building and they're moving light rail, heavy rail, monorail. They're trying to make it happen. So I think that that's a big thing. Also, you see a lot more affordable housing popping up. That's big. Mixed use. They're trying to push for all these kind of things. But look, I'm somebody who believes that LA is going the right direction. I know, dude, trust me. I'm on Nextdoor, Citizen app, WhatsApp, neighborhood groups. People want to say this is going down and this sucks and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? LA is always the city that we're moving forward and we're moving in a positive direction because people want to leave. Well, guess what? It's the home of the LA American dream, and people come in that are making a positive impact just as much as anybody wants to leave. And you know what else I read is that Los Angeles and California, this exodus people have been talking about, you know who's leaving? Is the people who aren't native here anyway. So they came, then they didn't like it, then they're leaving. So it's like, there's this narrative like, oh, then why are people leaving then? Well, guess what? People are still coming in droves and they're making this city better and there's improvements. If you don't believe it, go to neighborhoods like Sylmar, Boyle Heights, Koreatown that are having these kind of renaissances, and it's things that narrative is overblown. So I believe LA is moving in the right direction, and you're going to see that in 5 years. Take a snapshot now versus then, and you'll see that.
What's one piece of tangible advice you have for someone right now that wants to get into content creation? Because that's the direction the world is heading in, regardless of your age, gender, background, what you do for a living. Doesn't matter.
Easy.
So what's one piece of advice?
Important. Be genuine and be authentic. People can smell disingenuity like that. I think that there's a lot being said about younger generations, millennials, Z, alpha, like blah, 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 all this negative stuff. But I'll tell you what, I can't speak to any of that, but I know that they're more sophisticated at reading whether or not somebody's authentic or not than any previous generation was. And I think that that's a good trait because it's whether you're passionate about sports, Los Angeles, potato chips, hairstyling, it doesn't matter. There's people out there that are passionate about the same thing. And if that's what you want to talk about and that's what you want to create your content about and you're genuine about it and passionate about it, that's what's going to play more than anything. You can have great production value. You can have shitty production value. What I always said for LA in a minute, I always said low quality production, high quality content, because everything I do is on my phone. Sometimes there's background. I've shot on a freeway. I've shot in the wind. It sounds terrible, but guess what? I'm excited about what I'm reporting on and people are curious about it. So they're making it happen. For stuff that I do consume, I'm a big baseball card guy, right? Like growing up, I was a big baseball card guy. Somehow my algorithm, because algorithms know all, I get these people opening packs of baseball cards and it's so dumb, but I watch it. And guess what? The ones who I feel are like really into it and like get excited, they're not doing it for the money. They're like, oh my God, I remember. I go old like vintage cards and stuff. So my point is whatever you're into, if you're doing it passionately and authentically, it's a huge step in the right direction because faking it is going to get exhausting. Even if you can knock it out of the park a couple times, here's the problem with content creation is you had 1 million views. Great job. Now you got to do it tomorrow. Then you got to do it next week. Then you got to do it a month from now and a year from now. And if you want to do this for a living, you got to do this 5 years from now and 10 years from now. So it better be something that you're genuinely into. It better be something that you're passionate about and people can see it. Now, again, content creation is not for everybody. Not everybody has that personality. So, I mean, start there. But if you're somebody who feels like you want to do it, you have something to offer. And my second would be provide value. Unfortunately, I do feel there's a market for a lot of content that doesn't provide value. But at least if you're providing value, you can feel good about yourself as well while you're being authentic and genuine.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would say, I don't know if you're a fan of Gary Vee.
Yeah. I know a lot about, I was in affiliate marketing, so I know Gary Vee's whole story. I admire what he's accomplished. I'm a little bit leery of the cult of personality. So I hold him at arm's distance in that regard, but I know that he's highly affected some people in a positive way, motivated people and accomplished a lot. So I respect what he's done. So I mean, to say a fan, again, it's like I get leery, even if it's like Elon Musk and stuff like that, because people are just human. So I don't want to put him on too big of a pedestal, but he's accomplished a lot and is really like, made an impact in modern society.
Yeah. So, no problem. Did you want to say
Gary Vaynerchuk? Yeah, I knew him when he was doing Gary Vaynerchuk and like doing his wine thing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Back in 2009. Yes. Yeah, and all I want to say about that, no issue if, you like him or don't, or whatever critique you have, I completely respect it. Just the only thing I want to bring up is he made a point that was very interesting to me. He said, if you are shy to be on camera, that's just not you. You don't like seeing yourself on camera. It's fine. There's always other mediums. You could write articles. If you don't like writing articles, you could be on camera. If you don't like being on camera, you could just do audio. If you don't want people to see your face, but they could hear you. So there's other mediums to get whatever you prefer to get your message out about whatever it is that's helping people in a positive manner. So
there you go.
There we go.
That. Yep.
Yeah. And so I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'm just gonna wrap it up with this final question.
All right.
How has your viewpoint on Los Angeles changed over time? Because the way you viewed it, before you had your family, after you had your family, when you were single, when you were married? Of course, it's going to be a little bit different, I would assume. Has that viewpoint always, is the same internal feeling been the same, or has it changed over time?
I told you about the sort of evolution as I became an adult, and noticing the flaws a little bit more. But I can tell you this is every day I'm out here in a different part of the city, whether it's Montebello at the Armenian Genocide Monument for April 24th, or whether it's the Santa Monica Pier, or in Santa Clarita, talking about where gold was discovered, the first gold rush in California, 1842 in Plaza Rita Canyon. I always encounter people and communities that are awesome, that I didn't know about, and facts that I didn't know, and history that I didn't know, and people that are proud of every one of these neighborhoods. Again, Southgate, San Fernando, Pacific Palisades, everybody is proud of how their neighborhood became what it became and what it is today. And they want to show you the food. They want you to go to certain places. There's monuments, there's landmarks. So how has my outlook of LA shifted? Only to the sense that people really love this city and love their neighborhood. And the more this negative anti-LA rhetoric that I hear on a national scale, I just smile and laugh, because the people of Los Angeles know that their community, whichever it is a strong community, a good community, and a proud community. And there's a reason that Los Angeles has more Iranians than anywhere outside of Iran, more Thai people anywhere outside of Thailand, more Australians anywhere outside of Australia, Koreans, Mexico, Mexicans, Salvadoreños, Ugandans. Like, there's a reason. Well, I mean, again, there's so many, but Los Angeles draws from everywhere in the world, unlike any other city. And I know there are diverse cities. There are big cities. People, what about New York? No, come to Los Angeles, because all these neighborhoods, you have people rubbing elbows of every social economic class. And people are just, once you're in LA and of LA, you love Los Angeles and you feel that pride. And I love seeing that every day. So the more that I'm out there exploring, the more that I'm kind of on this, like, dude, Los Angeles is a really, truly special place that more people have to, like, know the real history and culture of.
We need more of this out there. We need more of this just good outlook. It doesn't always have to be about bad, you know. Fear sells. Fear is always selling. It sells, and it sells a lot, but it doesn't always have to be bad. It doesn't always have to be fear-mongering. We need this perspective. We need more of this. So I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man. It's important. I mean, you go out, I always tell my son, like, you go out, you think positive, things will be positive. No, it's not a cornball world of lollipops and butterflies all the time, but it really helps to have a positive outlook. Sure. Keep that energy and momentum going.
So, where can people find you?
LA in a Minute, everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Threads. I don't do much Facebook, ironically, but that's fine. YouTube, but also In a Minute with Evan Lovett podcast, Apple, Spotify, Audible, Overcast, whatever your podcast is. We're doing great. Top 250 Society and Culture, Apple Podcast, top 5 places in travel. It's a fun one. It's longer form of LA in a Minute, but the LA in a Minute episodes are the core. So find me LA in a Minute. Instagram is probably my favorite platform if I had to choose one, but you can find me anywhere.
Perfect. Fantastic stuff, man. This was just great. I learned a lot. Let me know what your favorite part of this interview was. Comment down below. Tell me what your favorite part of this interview was. I would love to know. We're going to go ahead and Evan's, and we're going to put the link in the description of where you can find them on all streaming platforms. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.